It is Red Rivalry Week here in the Big 12 as all the eyes of Texas will be upon Dallas Saturday morning as the 20th ranked Sooners will play against the unranked Texas Longhorns. Both of these teams coming into Dallas with an equal 2-2 record, both coming into Dallas with a lot on the line in different ways. Charlie Strong is fighting for his job. Oklahoma's fighting for Big 12 supremacy, if you will. The Sooners coming off a win over TCU in Fort Worth last Saturday, which put them back in the polls after a 1 week hiatus. There's a lot on the line here. I mean, there's just no way to go around it. Welcome to Sooner Nation, the online podcast of Heartland Sports, heartland-sports.com. I'm Matt Hofeld. I'm going to be joined here in a little bit by the one and only Joey Helmer from OU Insider to talk specifically about this game, talk a little bit about the Big 12. But when you look at Oklahoma, we said this. We said after the Ohio State loss that we don't really know how good this Oklahoma team is, and we don't know how bad this Oklahoma team is. Now, we saw a little bit where they go on the road. The win for the first time outside of Norman, only their second win of the season, equal the record at 2-2, but it puts them back in the top 25. A win in which Oklahoma did what they needed to do offensively. They ran the football. They passed with success, high percentage passes. You got a guy in Dede Westbrook who goes off for a career day. Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon combined for over 200 yards. You throw Baker Mayfield in there. You have 5 rushing touchdowns. But I don't think we're ready to say Oklahoma's back. Now, this week, you're going to face a Texas team that's limping into the Cotton Bowl with their pride hurt after a 50-43 loss to Cal, followed by a 49-31 loss at Oklahoma State last weekend. It's circle the wagons time for Texas, and we know what that means for Oklahoma. Well, Oklahoma is in the exact same position that they were in last season. They were a heavy favorite going into Dallas. The Longhorns limped in, licking their wounds. And Jay Norvell drew up a game plan that just took it to Oklahoma. And the question is, can they do that again this year? Charlie Strong demotes Vance Bedford, takes over the full responsibility of the defense. So once again, you're going to get wholesale changes on one side of the football. And offense doesn't seem to be the problem this season for Texas. It's defense. And we're going to talk about that. I want to talk with Joey first, and I'll share some thoughts after that. But if you're Charlie Strong, you finally get things going on the offensive side of the ball, and your defense is terrible. Vince Bedford is the only holdover coach from Charlie Strong's original staff in 2014. He's all but gone. I don't see any way Vince Bedford stays if Charlie Strong stays. I think one way or the other, Bedford's gone. But make no bones about it, Charlie Strong's career at Texas is in jeopardy, and this game may or may not save it. You absolutely have to win this game to save your job, but even if you do win this game, it's not 100% guaranteed you're going to save your job. There's a lot of momentum building towards Tom Herman. So I'm interested to see the psyche of the Longhorns. I'm also interested to see the psyche of the Sooners because news comes out that this week, it's been a bad week on the injury front. Tay Evans has to retire from football because of concussions. We'll ask Joey about Will Johnson, but I'm hearing it's very doubtful he'll play because of a concussion. And then it's announced yesterday after practice that Charles Walker will not play due to concussion. There was 3 games coming into this season that I really felt like Oklahoma had to have Charles Walker for. They were Houston, Ohio State, and Texas. And there's no way to sugarcoat it. Not having Charles Walker in this game facing a physical Texas football team that wants to run, it's going to hurt. There's no way around it. I like what Gallimore brings. I like what we've seen from Austin Roberts this year. I mean, the fact that Matt Romar is healthy is a good thing. But you don't have experience and you don't have depth and you don't have Charles Walker. He's an NFL caliber player that you're going to be down going into the Cotton Bowl. I think Todd McShay, ESPN's Todd McShay, had Walker as like a top 20 pick in the first round. So that's something to keep an eye on because you got to stop Texas from running the football. Well, I'll give you my keys to the game again, like I said, after we talked to Joey. But there's one of them right there. You got to stop them from running the football. The Longhorns are 12th in the nation in rushing, 261 yards a game. You got to get them off of that game. Oklahoma State was able to do it last week by beating them up a little bit. They lose Warren, the running back, who's not going to play against Oklahoma this weekend. They bang up Deontay Foreman, who he has to leave the game. He's supposed to be ready to go again this Saturday. You got the 18-wheeler package with Tyrone Swoops. Now you're going to have to face all that without Charles Walker. Let's talk to Joey Helmer, get his take on all of this as he shares his 2 cents on the Oklahoma Sooners, the Big 12 Conference, and the Red River rivalry.
All right, a special guest time now on the Sooner Nation podcast, bringing in from OU insider Joey Helmer. Joey, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Man, I'm great. I haven't really had a chance to talk to you since the Women's College World Series. I'm assuming you had a good summer.
Yeah, it was. That was great, and I'm glad they made me look smart when I picked them going into the Women's College World Series, and that should be a really fun team to look forward to next year and the year after with all the young talent they've got coming back.
Yeah, no doubt. They're definitely going to be a fun team to watch this coming spring. Well, you know, it's football season right now. Oklahoma 2-2, 1-0 in the Big 12. When you look at the Big 12 conference, if we go back to mid-August, and I would have told you, hey, Joey, going into this game, the Red River rivalry, OU and Texas are both going to be 2-2, and West Virginia and Baylor will be the top 2 teams in the Big 12. What would you have said?
Well, I for sure thought Oklahoma was far and above everyone else coming into the season, and I think the one thing that has really stood out about Oklahoma more than anything else is how big of a concern that cornerback spot is opposite Jordan Thomas, and frankly, that's been so much of an issue that it's caused so many big plays and really resulted in a couple of these losses to Houston and Ohio State. Now, I think Ohio State had OU outmanned in that game, but in terms of getting back to the Big 12, I still think this league is way up for grabs. I think Oklahoma is a serious player, but I would have been surprised to see Oklahoma not being in front of the rest of those teams at this point.
You already mentioned the cornerback spot, which is the big. I mean, that's the big thing right now. Will Johnson, his health is in question. I mean, what's the answer? Because I thought maybe moving Will Johnson over to corner could be something that they would look at, but since he was injured throughout the bye week, didn't play last week, is questionable for Saturday. Is there an answer on this team right now for that cornerback spot?
Well, I think the answer has to be improved play from Micaiah Quick. Frankly, at this point, Micaiah Quick, Parrish Cobb, or Dakota Austin just have to step up their level. And I think you've seen a better play out of Micaiah Quick. I think a lot of people want to look back to that Ohio State game and what Noah Brown was able to do. On the one play, Quick actually has pretty good coverage on that play, and the guy just makes a fantastic catch. And so I think there have been signs for him that he's getting better. And let's face it, this is a guy that's played receiver, for the early part of his career and has just switched back over to cornerback to the defensive side of the ball. And so there's certainly going to be an adjustment period when you factor that in. But again, Parrish Cobb is a guy that has a lot of upside. This is a freshman and a guy that only figures to get better. And so you hope for Kerry Cooks and company that these guys just improve as the season goes on, and that's the answer to your question mark there is that you got the guy, but just improved play is able to kind of stabilize that position.
Well, we know the injury situation on the Oklahoma's defensive front, but what are you hearing about the secondary? I mean, they were short a couple of guys last week. Are those Austin Parrish-Cobb was out. Will Johnson was out. What's your take this week? Are we going to see those guys on the field or not?
Cobb will be back. Will Johnson, I'm told, is not going to play. I think he's dealing with the concussion as well as Charles Walker, who is just absolutely a huge loss for Oklahoma in this game. I think that if you had asked one player, obviously besides maybe Baker Mayfield or one of the running backs, that you just could ill afford to lose in this game, it would be Charles Walker. You look at that game last week in Fort Worth and what OU was able to do defensively in that game was a big product of the pressure they were able to get up front. The secondary in the second, third quarter looked a lot better because guys like Charles Walker and Matt Romar and, Obo rushing from the linebacker spot were able to get pressure and bat down balls and get in Kenny Hill's face. And so that's, like we talked about, these injuries are a major, major concern. And Walker is a guy that they just couldn't afford to lose in this game.
You've been around sports for a long time, both as a journalist, as a fan, as an athlete. Have you seen a team have as many concussion issues as what's plagued Oklahoma this season? Tay Evans has to retire. You mentioned Will Johnson. We talked about Charles Walker. Is there something that Oklahoma needs to look at, what they're doing, and maybe do it differently, or is this just a string of bad luck?
I don't know. I think that Oklahoma, in terms of its concussion protocol, does everything that's consistent with what other programs around the country do. So I would almost stare on the side that it's just a bit of bad luck, really. And we've seen bad luck in terms of injuries here at Oklahoma before. Obviously, you look at that 2009 team when Sam Bradford got hurt and Jermaine Gresham and all those guys. But in terms of concussions, this is the most obvious example of concussions being such a serious issue. And I think it's an issue around the game right now in college football and in the NFL as well. And so, obviously Oklahoma's been hit big time, though, by concussions.
I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Which loss is more significant to their team, Charles Walker or Chris Warren III for Texas?
Yeah, I think I probably answered that in so many words based on what I just kind of went through the spill. But I would say Walker's a bigger injury. I think when you look at Dante Foreman, he'll be able to run the ball still for Texas. And I think a guy like Neville Gallimore is going to have to step up defensively for OU. But what you lose in Walker is just, obviously, you're losing an NFL caliber potential first-round pick that you're losing there. And so what he would be able to do to wreak havoc for Oklahoma up front for Buechele and making him uncomfortable is just absolutely critical to lose him.
I posted earlier this week on our site, Charlie Strong's pretty much going all in, demoting Vance Bedford, taking over the reins of the defense. There's literally no one else to take a fall. Is this the beginning of the end? Can he turn this around? He seems to think he can, but what do you think on the coaching situation at Texas, and what does that mean across the Big 12 if Texas suddenly has a vacancy again?
Well, I don't want to put it all on one game because I think after you see Texas beat Notre Dame the first game of the season, and everyone's talking about how Texas is back and this team is for real a potential player in the Big 12 and on the national stage, and then you see what's happened since. But I think Charlie Strong has to win this game to get some momentum going forward to keep his job. And so I think it is a bit of, well, if he loses, he's not going to keep his job. But I don't think it's just based on this game, I guess is what I'm saying. But I think if he is to save his job, he's going to have to win this game and then make a run down the stretch in Big 12 play. Otherwise, I think you're going to see Texas look elsewhere and potentially the guy like Tom Herman.
What do you think the magic number is for Charlie Strong? How many games in your mind, does he have to win to feel secure about coaching again in 2017 at Texas?
Gosh, it's a really good question. I think I say they have to win this game. So, they're 3-2 if they win this game. I think he has to get to the, really the 8-9 wins, and I don't even know if that's going to be enough, given the pressure that's kind of on him right now and from down there.
Listening to Sooner Nation, the online podcast of Heartland Sports, Joey Helmer, our special guest right now. Joey, have you seen Urban Meyer's comments from earlier today?
Yeah, I haven't got a chance to see him.
Well, he basically
talking about Oklahoma's defense.
Yeah, he said Indiana is the best defense they've seen all season, and that includes Oklahoma. I mean, what does that do? Does that just, there's no bulletin board material in my mind that's really going to affect the outcome of a game, but is that any motivation at all for this Oklahoma defense, or do they just look at this comment and say, yep, we got thrashed by Ohio State and move forward? What does that play any factor at all into the rest of the week?
It can be. I think I'd be interested to hear the tone of how he said it. If he said, well, Indiana has a really good defense, a better defense than anyone we've seen, and that even includes Oklahoma. Or if he said it in such a way that was like, well, Indiana's definitely better than Oklahoma's defense, So it would be interesting to hear the tone of how he said that, but certainly Oklahoma, that's going to get back to them. And I think when you look, Oklahoma did struggle defensively. They had the issues at cornerback that we've talked about in that game. And so it's not as if it's a false comment from Urban Meyer by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that they can definitely, Oklahoma, use this as motivation if they see this, and that can give them a little extra juice this weekend for sure.
All right, give me a couple of key players for each team that you're personally going to be looking at on Saturday.
Oklahoma's going to have to be able to run the ball in this game, and look at Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine, OU's two-headed punch there. Happen to be able to run the football. When we look, Matt, at the OU-Texas series over time, who wins this game is the team that's always able to establish the ground game and be able to run the football best. And I think Oklahoma, those two guys are going to be able to, or are going to have to be able to establish the run game, and especially the offensive line is going to have to get them a push up front to give them holes to be able to run the ball. And then I think defensively, it's going to have to be some of those guys up front are going to have to fill in for Charles Walker. Maybe a guy like Neville Gallimore steps up and has a really good game. Matt Romar being healthy is key as well. And so, some of those guys stepping up, and again, like we've talked about, taking some of that pressure off the secondary. I think some of those are the key guys.
How big of a difference can Charlie Strong make in the Texas secondary in just 5 days?
It's the $1 million question. If he can make a big difference, it's going to make a big difference in this game because Oklahoma is certainly going to look to exploit that as well as running the ball. And so it'll be interesting to see. But I, at the end of the day, I think your personnel is your personnel, and it kind of is what it is.
All right, so who's got the worst secondary issue, Oklahoma or Texas?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think Texas' secondary has been disastrous. There's no doubt about it. And Oklahoma has had its issues, obviously, at that cornerback spot. But I think when I look across the board and guys like Stephen Parker and Jordan Thomas can play at a higher level, I'd really like Oklahoma's secondary if they could get that one cornerback spot figured out.
All right, Joey Helmer, OU Insider, Oklahoma 247sports.com. Joey, tell everybody how they can get you, not just on OU Texas coverage, but how can they access 247 Sports? How can they access you on Twitter? Tell them how they can find you.
Sure, yeah, you can read all my stuff at ouinsider.com. That's oklahoma.247sports.com as well. Either of those go right to our website there, and then my Twitter handle is at JoeyHelmer247.
All right, Sooners, Longhorns, Oklahoma, 10-point favorite, 73 over/under. Give me a prediction here, Joey.
Yeah, I think I've kind of went a little bit back and forth on this game. I think the spread, I'm surprised that the line on it is still people aren't pulling off Oklahoma in this last 24 hours, even with the Charles Walker news. But I think Oklahoma is going to win this game. I just, at the end of the day, think, as I kind of talked about, I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to win that ground game, and I think that Oklahoma is going to come out with a close victory in this football game this weekend.
All right, Joey. Hey, appreciate your time, buddy. Have a great weekend. Be safe traveling to Dallas, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sure, thanks.
All right, see you, bud.
Big thanks to Joey Helmer for joining us. One of my favorite guys in the media pool. Got to sit by him at several events last season with baseball, the World Series. Just a great guy. Glad to give us some insight. And I have to agree. I have to agree 100% with what he's saying about Oklahoma. You got to run the football. Texas is going to enter this game with the worst pass defense in the Big 12. In two areas. The first area is completion percentage from opponents. No one completes more passes percentage-wise in the Big 12 than what is done against Texas. So they're the worst at a completion percentage, and they're the worst in yards per game. Now, that means if you're a guy like Lincoln Riley, who you love to sling the ball around, that temptation is going to be there. But to really take advantage of that, you have to be ahead of the change. If you're facing second, third, and long, then it's not really going to work that well. 64.7% is what opposing quarterbacks are completing against the Texas Longhorns. Texas giving up an average of 274.8. Let's just round that up. 275 yards a game is what Texas is allowing. This Texas secondary has given up 12 passing touchdowns this season, and they've yet to record an interception. Now, Oklahoma has really no right to talk here. Can't beat your chest here because you just got your first interception this season last week against TCU. But the reality is, if you're Oklahoma, you want to take full advantage of this. And you do that by running the football. You've got Joe Mixon. You've got Samaje Perine. Go for 4 yards. Go for 5 yards. Go for 6 yards on first down. Put yourself at 2nd and 6, 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, somewhere around there. And you've got all kinds of options. But if you give up a quarterback sack on first down, if you get stonewalled at the line of scrimmage on first down, if you throw an incomplete pass on first down, then suddenly that passing percentage is going to go down. Baker Mayfield has the opportunity to be the Big 12 Player of the Week this week. But he can't do it without Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon. I agree. I think Joey nailed it right on the head. You've got to run the football to win this game. And then the second thing you got to do, if you flip sides of the ball, we kind of started the podcast out by talking about this, is you have to stop Texas. You have to limit what they can do on the ground. You got to figure out this 18-wheeler package. I kind of feel like it's going to run the same course as the Belldozer package did when Oklahoma ran that a while back. When it first came out, it was all the rage. And then you had to tweak it a little bit and because teams were picking up on it. And the more they had to tweak the Belldozer package, the less effective it became. And you're starting to see a little bit of that with Tyrone Swoops. I like it. I like what the idea of it. They unveiled it this game last year against the Sooners, and essentially all Jay Norvell did last year was take the Belldozer package and put it in burnt orange. And put Tyrone Swoops back there, who I think may be a better athlete than what Blake Bell was, and that's no knock against Blake Bell. He's making his money in the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers. But I think it's becoming less effective the more you have to tweak it. But how big of a deal is it that Charles Walker's not going to be out there on the field? Can Oklahoma consistently stop the run without one of their key defenders on that line? You're out Matt Diamond as well. So you come into an issue of rotation. Man, I think if you're Mike Stoops, you dial up blitzes at the specific times. Run blitzes, pass blitzes. They've got to get support on this line. Which, by the way, goes back to the need to run the football. Really no need for me to continue very much longer on the podcast. I'm almost out of time anyway. Because Joey nailed it. The team that runs the ball wins. Let me ask you this question, though. Oklahoma, it's an even year, so Oklahoma's the home team. They'll be wearing crimson. Even years have been good to the Sooners. Do you look at that at any way? Do you look at the even years and say, well, this is kind of, odd years are bad for Oklahoma. Even years are good. That's just the way this series has gone the last several years. You guys look into that at all? I mean, I don't really. It's fun to know about. When you look at this rival, it's fun to see that and say, well, okay, that's something interesting. But, I mean, how much stock do you put into that when it comes to picking this game? I mean, you can go all the way back to the beginning. Bob Stoops' first year in this rivalry was an odd number year. They lost. They won 2000. They won 2002. They won 2004. Dropped an even number year in 2006 and 2008. But since then, they haven't lost in an even number year. They won 2010. They won 2012. They won 2014. And now we're at 2016. Do you put any stock into that? I don't really, but like I said, it's fun to talk about. Joey's got the Sooners winning this game. I've got the Sooners winning this game. I'll give you a score prediction here in a minute. But we got to talk Big 12 weekend schedule first. There's some interesting games this weekend. Just because of what happened last weekend. I think if you look at this slate last weekend, you think, well, outside of OU Texas, there's not much there to look at. But because of what happened last weekend, I think 3 of the 4 games are worth their merit. I think 3 of the 4 games are going to be fun to follow. I don't think, the one game, the odd game out is TCU at Kansas, which will air the exact same time as Oklahoma's playing Texas. The only reason you're tuning into that game is if you're a Horned Frog or a Jayhawk fan. Because there's nothing redeemable there. The only question is, will TCU cover 28.5 points? The over-under in that game, that game is what? It's like 64? That's interesting. But that game's not, we'll call it what it is. It's a garbage game. And I do think TCU covers a 28.5. They're angry. Gary Patterson is mad at the Big 12, and he's mad at Baker Mayfield. He's going to take it out on Kansas. Iowa State travels to Oklahoma State. 2:30 kickoff is the game that'll follow Texas and Oklahoma. I hate, let me just say this. I hate this about the Big 12 television package. all the conference realignment talk, all the talk about television and rights and contracts. There's four Big 12 games this weekend. 3 of the 4 Big 12 games are on ESPNU. It's terrible. Oklahoma State's hosting Iowa State. Here's the reason why this game is interesting. The Cowboys are a 17-point favorite. Matt Campbell's figured something out in Ames, Iowa. Cyclones were within a field goal of Baylor last week. Baylor's a team, obviously, that's beaten Oklahoma State. They're the top team in the Big 12 right now with West Virginia. I'm curious what Iowa State can do. Now, they're going on the road. Oklahoma State showed improvement. They're 3-2 on the season. Huge win for them against Texas last week. This could be a letdown spot for Oklahoma State. Coming off that big win. First time they've beaten Texas in Stillwater since 1997. Iowa State coming off of a moral victory, if you will, over Baylor. This game draws some interest for me. And the other game, the nightcap, 6 o'clock kickoff on ESPNU. Texas Tech at Kansas State. I think Kansas State has the best defense in the Big 12. And I think Texas Tech has no defense. I mean, I think you'd have the same luck stopping teams if you just didn't put anybody out there on defense. Incomplete pass. This is the Big 12. Everyone's going to throw. I mean, Texas Tech is terrible. We talk about how bad the Longhorns are on defense. Texas Tech, man, statistically, they're not there with the Longhorns yet. But they also have Stephen F. Austin and Kansas on their schedule. This is a team that gave up 68 points to Arizona State, 45 points to Louisiana Tech in a win. It's not a good football team. And now, it looks like they're going to be without Patrick Mahomes. And that changes things drastically. I mean, Patty Mahomes is what makes this thing click for Texas Tech. And you take him out of the equation, I don't know. I don't know if Texas Tech can win on the road at Kansas State. You look at that and you think, well, the Jayhawks, forgive me, Bill Snyder. The Wildcats are an 8-point favorite, and you just kind of scratch your head at that. But then you realize that Texas Tech is coming into Manhattan with no defense and possibly no Patrick Mahomes. All of a sudden, this game has a lot more interest as well. Kansas State held West Virginia to 17 points on the road last week. So, you tell me, who do you like in this game? I like Kansas. I like Kansas at home. I like Oklahoma State at home, but I think Iowa State would cover. If you've seen my Friday locks, be very, very careful. Very, very careful in taking any advice I say when it comes to point spreads. Well, all right, that's going to bring us to Oklahoma, Texas. Prediction time. Maybe, I don't know. I think Charles Walker being out is going to be a bigger deal than what Oklahoma needs it to be. But I think Oklahoma wins this game. And I think they win it by a comfortable 3 points. And when I say a comfortable 3 points, I think they win it in a game that's not as close as what the scoreboard indicates. But I like Oklahoma somewhere around 41-38. And hope I'm right, man. I hope I'm right on that. I don't like the point spread. I want to like the point spread. I want this to be a 65-13 blowout. And I'll be more than happy if that's exactly what it is. But I see it being a lot closer than that. 41-38 is my prediction. Thanks for listening. Big thanks to Joey Helmer. Check out OUinsider.com. Have a great weekend. Boomer Sooner, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
When I wake up, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. And when I go out, Well, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. And if I get drunk